The NFL draft is just over a week away. What will the Bills do with the 30th pick in round one? We break down what Brandon Beane had to say in his pre-draft news conference and give our thoughts on the possibilities for Buffalo. That all comes up in this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus podcast.
All right, welcome back to Buffalo Plus, presented by BuffaloPlus.com. Mike Catalana, Dan Fates. I am Jenna Cottrell. We got the gang all together as we're going to be talking about it. Brandon Beane just meeting with the media on Tuesday, going over the Bills' drafting approach as the NFL draft is now less than 10 days away. Mike, let's get into it. Your overall thoughts on what Beane had to say and the Bills' kind of strategy as we get closer to the 29th.
He seems to me like a guy who's had success in this end of it at the draft and has confidence and has options. Now, he doesn't have the options you would have if you had a top 10 pick, but he also has an AFC championship level roster and he's trying to make smart moves there. So I think Beane, look, he knows what he's doing. I tweeted it out this week. He's made 23 draft picks since he's been with the Bills. 22 of those guys are currently on NFL rosters. I mean, that doesn't happen around the league. He's picked players who can play in this league and find their roles. And he's found guys that they want back. Like, you know, we'll talk about the fifth-year option stuff, but when you're drafting guys that you know you want back or you want to sign to new deals, you're picking the right guys. I think he has options. I think he said he can go any way. I think he's confident in his team and his coaches, and he's also confident in his ability to find the right guys. So that's the way I look at him, as a guy sitting back there going, let me see what comes to me, and I'll be ready to make a move.
Yeah, he's a guy that's always fallen in love with the board. He always talks about the board. You set up your board, and then you follow your board. He's always talking about his board, and that's the board, and that's what you follow. And listening to him talk again today, I kind of said it on the previous podcast for Buffalo Plus videos that we've had. I just see him as a very comfortable situation where I think he trades back. Like, that's just my vibe that I got from him being like, you know, we don't have a fourth round pick this year, you know, but we do have two in the fifth. And, you know, a lot of teams like to come up there late in the end of that first round because they can get that fifth-year deal. And he was talking about, and we'll get to the fifth-year options, but he was talking about Josh Allen's contract coming up and possibly a Tremaine Edmonds contract, and talking about how expensive that can be and how first-round picks are expensive to re-sign and things like that. All of that just makes me think that he'd much rather have 2 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks. That's just my gut, and that he felt very comfortable knowing, hey, we're going to be at 30. What's the big difference between 30, you know, and 34 or 30 and 35? Like, if we have, again, I know he says that we'll be ready to move up, or we'll be ready to draft at 30. Every GM is going to say those things. Like, that's not like buzzworthy. Like, oh, he's ready to move up. It's just the fact that I think, like Mike said, he's comfortable with the roster that he has assembled and knowing, and he did kind of say it, we're going to take the best player available. It's not necessarily a starter this year. As I've said before, I think he's looking at next year's starters to see what they're going to go with free agents and what some contracts are going to be.
Well, he did talk about, you know, the fact that they have to focus on not just the short-term success, that long-term success. And we know that's been a piece of Brandon Beane in the way he drafts. And again, he talked about how important it was to re-sign Matt Milano and players like that, Darrell Williams, because it offered the fact that he already knew what he needed, and it wasn't those players in those positions. So I think that piece is huge. But, Mike, it is kind of funny because the Bills are drafting 30th. You know, this is a team that's used to drafting within the top 15 or places like that. What a difference it makes, and how you think about what they're going to get in this first round if they do end up getting a pick.
Yeah, but like I said, his flexibility. Now, he wasn't part of it the year before he came to the Bills, or the draft right before he came to the Bills. But think about that year. And they trade back. And we know, yes, it was Mahomes, right? Everybody's made the point about that. But at 27th, they took Tre'Davious White, who's one of the top corners in the NFL and was a starter from day one. Now, you could make the argument that that team was not very good and Trey was going to start. And, you know, if you were, you know, healthy and ready, you had a good chance to start. But think about that, the quality of player you got at 27. That's why sometimes I'll hear even guys asking the questions. They'll be like, well, 30. I'm talking about the top 30 players in the draft. I'm sorry. If it's a corner, that corner has a chance to start this year. He's certainly going to play, as we talked about, even a defensive end. right? Those positions where you are playing multiple corners, multiple defensive ends. It may not go down in Pro Football Reference as a game started, but that guy is a main component of the team. I mean, Taron Johnson is a starter for this team, right? He is, because you play nickel so much. You've got that slot corner in there. So I do think that's true, but this team has, they've moved so much, moving back in 17, moving up in 18, making the trade last year to get Diggs, and that kind of worked out pretty well for them. So they can do any of those things, but they've been able to find players no matter where they've been.
Yeah.
And Jenna, I thought it was, like I said, very telling when Beane said, like, we're going to take the best football player available, regardless of if we have a starter right now at that position. And to me, that rung alarm bells at two spots.
Safety?
Really? It rung an alarm bell for me at O-line.
Okay.
Thinking that an offensive lineman could get picked at 30 and wouldn't really be asked to play much, if at all, this year because they have the 5 guys. Now, injuries always happen. You always want to have extra linemen. That's never a bad thing to have. And again, as much as I have been hesitant to say this, that somewhat triggered a running back to me. Because again, it just kind of saying like, hey, we may draft a running back, but they'll do the talk going into the season of, Mike, we don't need a running back. He's not here to start.
Hold on.
Do we hear that correct?
On the record that without either of us ever saying the words, Dan used the words triggered and running back.
He's usually triggered about running backs, but not in that way.
And so it was very telling because, like, you look at positions where obviously they have all of the starters, but there was just a couple other things where, and Brandon Beane also gave a shout out unprompted to Levi Wallace. Said that Levi Wallace is going to play in the league a very long time and that he's a guy that was undrafted, but he has all the intangibles. We talked about buzzwords, versatility, character in the McDermott Beane era that fits this Bills team. So I don't know. That was one of the another alarm bells that went off when all of a sudden he's talking about guys and where they fit and where they fall. And all of a sudden it was like, hey, Levi Wallace, he was a guy undrafted, who's going to play in the league for a long time. And I was like, that was out of left field for no reason.
Okay, but let's also look at it this way, Jenna.
Yeah,
they've been trying to replace Levi. They have, and they're going to try to do it again, and they're going to take a corner in this draft.
Yeah, they are.
They're going to, Now I know they didn't really go high since Trey. I mean, they go 7th round with Dane Jackson, but they're going to take a corner. And at running back, I thought it was interesting the way he phrased that.
I did too.
Yeah, when he said, if a guy has, he said, neither of our guys are, home run hitters, and they're not. Yeah. And it was Dan Fates who pointed out that their skill sets were very similar between the two. And when everybody else was calling them thunder and lightning, Dan was like, no. And I think, Dan, you're right there because I don't think they're that different. Yeah. And the one thing they both lack is the ability. Yeah. And, and everybody points to ATN out of Clemson. The kid is a special player. And at 30, hey, you could also trade back and end up with him early in the 2nd round, depending on where you go. Yeah. Because there's a ton of wide receivers who are going to be late 1st, early 2nd round picks too. So getting a running back, I think is a possibility. Staying at 30 and taking them, I guess we'll see because you do pick up that 5th year.
I was just when Brandon Beane was like, if he has a different skill set, and then mentioned the fact of, Brandon Beane must hear this stuff though. You must hear everyone talking about Travis Etienne because for him to just kind of pepper that in there, I was like, ooh. No, I said safety earlier just because I could see the Bills, like you said, Dan, trading back. And we always think of the Bills having, so much strength at safety. But when you think and listen to Brandon Beane talk about how, you can draft a guy later on, maybe not in those first couple of rounds, but later on and build his way into a starter. That way you don't have that drop off. Yeah. You can have players learn from guys earlier on. But I will say, you got to think, Dan, how hard is it for this draft? And Brandon Beane touched on it because some of these players have not played in years because of opting out for the season or having injuries. Some of these guys' tape is from 2018. It just makes it so much more difficult for the scouts.
Yeah, I think Mike has mentioned it before when we were talking about some of these pro days that players have been having where all of a sudden a guy jumps off the page on these pro days and everybody's like, wow, this guy's climbing up draft boards. It's not like Brandon Beane didn't know about a guy and then all of a sudden he ran a 4 3, and all of a sudden Brandon Beane's like, you know what? We should watch some tape on this guy. I don't know where does this guy go to school? I just saw it on the bottom line of NFL Network. Like, I think a lot of these guys that were already on their board before this season, they knew whether they were going to be opt out. If a player opted out last year, like, I don't know, an LSU wide receiver, somebody like that, numerous guys opted out. I'm sure that was maybe some of the first guys that they scouted during the season to go, let's get these guys who we're not going to need to find new tape. They're not going to add anything. Like, let's get them out of the way. So, and again, Beane said the toughest part about this year, because last year you guys were at the combine, like pre-pandemic, like weeks before, like the world shut down.
Believe me, I think about it all the time. I'm like, wow.
Flying into Indy like it was nothing. And I just look at it, and this year, Beane said what's so tough is medicals, and these teams just not really knowing where these guys are. He even said, he goes, some of the guys that were at their pro days or were here or there snuck out before they got scans and snuck out before they got x-rays. Like, that's not by accident. Like, they left for a reason. So a big question mark there, Jenna.
And you are right about the injuries, or, you know, how they've come back from something, because if you heard the way he phrased it, our medical people are usually very sure. And let's be honest, the Bills, if they don't have the #1 medical training staff in the league, they're right up there, because they have done a phenomenal job bringing players in, bringing players back from injury, all those things. And part of it is because they do their homework and they know what to look for and know what to ask. Some teams, you know, it depends on the injury. Like, how is this guy going to come back? So they have not been able to really check these guys out fully. And I think it is going to hurt some injured players or some guys coming off an injury, because they may fall a little bit. Again, you say that there could be a player that in previous years, because you'd have that information, you'd be ready to jump late first round for him. That guy slips mid-second round. You may be willing to move up to get him in the second round because it's a little easier to move there. So I think all those things are very, very important in this year's draft. The lack of knowledge and the injuries and some of the tape, and the position the Bills are in with maybe being able to take a chance or two at a certain point, because they got a pretty good roster.
Do you think, to a certain degree, it might cut out when you fall in love with a player, when you get to, you know, spend so much time with them? Now, they had the availability of Zooming and things like that, Dan, but when you just can really look at a player's tape, do you think maybe there is some inherent advantage to that? Or do you think it's still at a point where, you know, you obviously want to be able to get a total sense of the player, but sometimes people can say the right stuff. Let's be real.
Well, and I think that's a disadvantage for guys like Beane and McDermott, because they want to know who you are besides the football player. Like, and I know, again, I've constantly, when Beane came in and McDermott came in, and I was criticizing them about these campfire conversations that they would have and kumbayas at training camp, and I was like, this is silly. This isn't Pop Warner or varsity football. Like, you need talent. But Beane and McDermott have been able to say, talent is part of the equation, but you have to fit into what we're building here, and the process and the culture in Buffalo. Like, they've had, you know, their opportunities to, you know, to kind of pick free agents, and guys that have been here have wanted to be here for a reason. So to your point, Jenna, about they can watch guys on film and the tape and really like them, but I think they may be hesitant if they don't know who they are without getting to, you know, Sean McDermott, without getting them a wrestling handshake and to really get to me to know him.
Hey, see, I meant it more as like, you can have a player that has pretty good tape, but, you know, it's obviously an interview process, and you can have guys that say, I want to do X, Y, Z, all of these things, but you can really go off of character references from other coaches. But I see what you're saying, Dan.
Hey, Jenna, the part I was thinking of was, and you can listen to the full interview with Brandon Beane. It's right here on Buffalo Plus on the YouTube page. Is when they talked about those interviews, and they missed that one-on-one. And he actually said, you know, sometimes we'll go back and listen to them again. And I was thinking of, you know, everybody maybe in their life has been in a circumstance where, like, they're looking back at text messages, trying to figure out what did they mean there? Or, you know, and he's saying, like, we're going to watch it again. Or they let somebody else do the interview and then they watch it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's the position coach that does the interview. Maybe it's when the coach or the GM's not in there. Like,
Yeah.
think about that. That way of saying, we got to figure out who this guy is. You know, it's a little bit of like, you know, Facebook stalking, I guess. You know?
It's like it's the listening to the interview again just immediately made me think of the Office episode where Michael Scott's re-listening to the voicemail from Jan. Yeah. And he like gets everybody to come in and he's like, Michael, I guess I missed you. It's like, what did that mean? It's like, did she miss me? It's like, she missed you. And it's like, everybody come into the office during performance reviews. Anyway, that was just really good.
That's a good analogy. And by the way, Dan mentioned about the, you know, guys moving up and down the board. Jenna, you remember too, from Combine, AJ Epinesa did not run a good 40. And people are like, he's diving, he's falling, whatever it is. He may have moved on some teams' boards. He didn't move on the Bills board, and they sat there and waited, and he was the first player that they took. So while it can adjust a little bit, I think they basically have their board, as Dan said, set, and then there's minor adjustments to it.
Yeah. And Brandon Beane was asked, obviously, a lot about the draft, but also about the fifth-year options for Josh Allen, as well as Tremaine Edmonds. They have until later in May to pick up that option. Mike, can you kind of explain why Brandon Beane wants to wait and what it would mean for Josh and Tremaine and how everything would play out?
Okay, simple terms, when you're a first-round pick, you have a 4-year contract with a 5th-year team option. They can pick it up. It has to be done by May 1st, so it's right at the end.
I thought it was later in May. My bad.
Is that not May 1st?
I thought it was like May.
Oh, you might be right. It might be I thought initially it was May 1st, but it might be a couple
May
days after.
14th,
I think it is 15. That's the date they have to pick it up. So when they pick that up, and they've even adjusted the rules on the what it's worth, it's basically the last year of his contract. So think about it. For a guy like Josh Allen, and it's impacted by his success. He's made Pro Bowls. Same with Tremaine Edmonds. So, and it's based on their draft position. So Josh was picked 7th. He's made the Pro Bowl. He gets his deal for that 5th year is about $20 million. So think of it this way. It's as if a franchise tag. It's 1 year, $20 million against the cap that year. If you don't do anything else, that contract for that year is a big cap hit. Same with Tremaine Edmonds. So what teams will do is pick up the 5th-year option and immediately begin negotiating an extension of that player. I mean, there have been times where teams picked up the 5th-year option. They let the guy play it out. He becomes a free agent. So they do have the issue of what's the cap going to be next year? Can we pick up these 5th-year options, still continue negotiating? Do we need to pick up the 5th-year options? Because you could do the same thing. You could not pick up the option and still negotiate an extension with that player. And would they pick it up on Josh and not pick it up on Tremaine? Now, I don't know if they would do that.
Yeah.
But the cap comes into play, and the idea of how far along are they on an extension if you are going to keep that player. So I think didn't he mention, he said they've had some conversation with the agent, with Josh.
Yeah.
I think this is still going to get sort of pushed back a little bit until they get it figured out number-wise, but it might very well impact a decision. And maybe you sit there and go, wait a minute, they didn't pick up the option on Tremaine Edmonds. It could happen. I don't think it will, but I guess it could.
Yeah. You're also getting to, I like that Brandon Beane had talked about it because it's the one thing with this Josh Allen contract, when it does get done, is how is it structured? And Beane was asked about that today, and he said there's a bunch of different ways we can structure it. We're trying to figure out where the salary cap is going to be. And he said that the difference is sometimes the agents and the players are hearing that it's going to raise 15%. And he's like, the coaches and the teams are hearing 8%. He's like, that's a big difference on where we think the salary cap is going to be. Like, that's not just a couple million, that's tens of millions. So that is one of the factors that goes into it. And again, I keep going back to what Dak Prescott's contract was and how much money he got paid up front. You know, it was a big deal, but it's really not annually all that much money that is going to hamstring the Dallas Cowboys. People were like, oh my gosh, all that money, you're taking up so much of your team's salary cap. It was a lot of money, but Jerry Jones had the ability to cut $76 million right into Dak Prescott's account.
Yeah.
Is Terry Pagula going to be comfortable doing that? Yeah. That's a conversation that Beane has to have with the guy that cuts the checks.
And then there's the other part you've seen with Mahomes' contract, automatically gets upgraded to signing bonus, and changes that. And some of those things may get written in that makes it better for the team. Player gets his money early, and it works might be based on the cap. Might be if the cap goes up a certain percentage, the next year of Josh's deal automatically becomes a part of a signing bonus, so you can attribute more to that year. So there are a lot of different ways they can do it. It's going to be
your nephew, Mike.
What's that?
We need Garrett.
Yes, my nephew. My nephew is a absolute
capologist
on the NBA cap, but knows still more about the NFL cap than I would say 98% of the fans and 10% of the general manager.
Yeah, we might have to have him featured on one of our episodes. Well, I guess, Mike, I was kind of surprised because, and Dan alluded to this, like, we've heard it so much about the cap is going to explode next year with that TV deal, all of that new money, and hearing Brandon Beane talk in a more subdued way about, we don't really think the line's going to move that much up. Is there an element of like smoke and mirrors to that? Because we do know the TV deal is coming. I guess it plays into as well, like, will fans be back in the stadiums and things like that? But it makes it interesting.
Yeah, if you read some of those TV deals, some of them don't even take effect the money-wise for a couple of years. They're pre-done, and the money comes in. Look, the league, the NBA did this years ago where they got this burst of money from the TV deals. And I don't know if you remember this, but they put it all in one season. And teams went out and spent bad money on average players. And it was a weird year. They could have spread it out through more years. I think all the leagues may have learned something from that. Why have down years on the cap and then have this massive year? And then, I think the NFL knows how to deal with this cap in that way. But they do play a little bit with these numbers. They do cry a little poverty all the time. And we don't know. I mean, no general manager wants to sit there and go, man, we're going to be flush with cash. By the way, I have a bandage on my finger because just so you're aware of this, don't ever reach your hand into a DOP kit, a shaving kit, with the razor sticking up.
You should have gave a warning to some people.
I'm just telling you.
Specifically, Dan.
It's not that bad.
The other one? Is that the other one?
Mike also has really weird pinkies.
But
it's got a balding finger.
That's what it is. By the way, I am from near Philly, and it is the middle finger. So just in case we're curious about that, I'm not doing that. I'm just reminding you of those.
Playing hurt. Yes,
playing hurt. But,
not injured.
These teams sometimes will play a little poverty on the cap. Oh, woe is me. Woe is me. Just remember this all the time. Teams don't get rid of players they don't want because of the cap. It doesn't happen.
Yes.
They'll find a way to keep the ones they want.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. No, I agree. Brandon Beane was also asked a lot about the Chiefs. And I feel like this is a point we hear so much about. What do you do to counteract Patrick Mahomes? And I'm kind of tired of it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I just think we've been talking about it so much that it's like, we get it. He's really, really good.
Hey, remember when every NBA team had to figure out how to beat the Warriors? And you're like, wow, Steph Curry's scoring all of these points. The Warriors are still bottom of the Western Conference now. It's the Chiefs are very good, but you can't all be focused on him. And I thought it was great. I think Beane was locked and loaded. He knew he was going to face a question, and he dropped the great dad line of maybe we can get a 12th guy out there to stop him. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great line. He's like, how, you go in this draft, how do you prepare to stop him? He's like, I don't know. He's doing things you've never seen before, 12th guy. I just think that it gets a little bit overblown where the fact of, he made another point about saying that you saw what the Bucks did with their front four and beating the pressure. And he alluded to the fact and didn't mention that the Chiefs were without their two starting left tackles, which played a massive role in the Super Bowl. So as I've said, don't let this this recency bias kind of sway you. Yes, there are things that need to be done. Patrick Mahomes has been slowed down at times. The Chiefs haven't won every single football game. The Bills need to focus on their division first, as well as focusing outside and not only just the Chiefs.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. Number one, you're right. And not only about just focusing on the Chiefs, but look what's right behind them. Okay? The Colts. the Ravens, maybe the Chargers this year.
Yeah.
Who knows what happens with the Browns? They've spent money. That roster is loaded. So if you're so focused on the Chiefs, and there's a reason to be because of their success, you do have the rest of this loaded conference to play. And I mean, I'm even talking about a team like the Steelers, and then let alone the whole division. So Dan's right. Division first, with sort of part of an eye on the Chiefs. You play them in the regular season. They're going to be there. And, in all likelihood, if you're good, you're going to maybe meet the Chiefs. The other thing I wanted to say is, and this is just us doing this, right? Nobody hears this, right? I just mentioned that Brandon Beane is like Calvin Johnson catch radius when it comes to handling questions, right?
Oh, yeah.
Even the bad throws, he catches. Okay?
Yeah.
So sometimes you listen, some of the questions are, I don't know, just not great. And Brandon Beane handles them just like Calvin Johnson on a bad throw. It's like, it looks like a good throw because he reaches up and grabs it. Just pointing that out.
No,
he's good and he's very smooth.
He's very likable. Yeah.
Never, dismisses a question. I've yet to hear him say that.
I think that's a great point, Mike, too, especially
dismissed today.
Yes, and I think a lot of GMs and head coaches are good at it, especially where they're facing a lot of questions right now where they're not going to give you an honest answer. Like, hey, Brandon, thinking about trading up? Yeah, we've been calling the Eagles, we've been calling the Dolphins, we've been trying to get in the top 10. It's been really hard though. Like that information is not going to get out. Like, so some of the questions I hear you.
I believe you could have said in the question today, Brandon, who are you going to take at number 3? And he would have given you he wouldn't have said the guy's name, but there's a whole lot of players I really like at that spot. And
you sound like him.
What's that?
You sound like him. Like that was actually a great impression as opposed to your normal impression.
He's losing a little bit of, but when we were in Carolina, we really liked whoever, that's what he does. He's very good. He's not just good at his job. He's good at the whole part of it. So that's why I said right in the beginning, Jenna, when you asked, this guy has confidence because he's had success.
There's
and
trust.
His team has success. But you hit on a few now. It could be a huge difference maker for this team. Fill in some gaps, maybe a dynamic player that adds to it with Josh. That's why if you're a Bills fan, it's a long wait. But hey, on the plus side, unless they make a deal, it's less of a wait than it was last year when you had to wait till round 2 and day 2.
That's true. We know Brandon Beane was sitting on his hands too.
Guys, I had tweeted out earlier today, and I kind of said this before, that Brandon Beane can pick any position at number 30, and I wouldn't be shocked as long as it wasn't a quarterback.
Yeah.
And somebody responded, and I don't know the person off the top of my head, but he goes, I said, the reason they can do that is because that's how well constructed this roster is. And it's a testament to what Beane has done. As Mike says, 23 players drafted, 22 are still in the league. And somebody responded to me and said, that's what bad teams can also do too. Like where it's like you can throw a dart right now and pick any position.
Yeah.
And it would help the team. Yeah. And I thought, and I was like, yeah, there were times when the Bills were so bad, it's like they could go anywhere.
Yes,
and it's probably going to help the team. Like Beane is like, that is what a unique situation that Beane is in to go again. And I think he did allude to it. I think there was some honesty of going, we're going to take the best player available. He may not help immediately. Like Jenna mentioned, we're not just looking short-term success. We're looking long-term success as well.
I think that's a huge point of it too, is he's built up so much trust. And I think we've seen a lot of distrust with the Bills in terms of in past years not being privy to certain things, things of that nature. And I think now to see where the team is at, and also let's talk about this too, like Josh Allen and him being what he has been is just so big for this team. Like they don't have to, having the availability of getting Josh, signing him in terms of being a rookie, developing him themselves. Like I think because of that, obviously Brandon Beane gets some huge points and some huge trust, as he should, but it's just, it makes for such a different draft experience.
If the biggest problem you have is that your all-pro quarterback is going to get paid, it is an issue, but it's a lot better issue than going, okay, now we're starting over again, or we're going to find this guy, or we're going to see if somebody can play. Because you could work numbers and do the best job you can, like Dan said, to work around Josh's contract. It's going to be different. We know that.
Yeah.
Because it's going to still take a chunk of the cap. But it's a heck of a lot better of a problem to have than going, who's going to be our quarterback? That's why you see these teams, like the Jets are going to be, where they're starting new. Okay, I sort of get that. They're where the Bills were in 18, if you look at it this way and say, we're starting new, we're drafting this quarterback, we cleared up some cap space, here we go. Okay, it's taken the Bills a few years to move up, and you got to get it right with the quarterback. You're right, Jenny. You got it right with the quarterback, at least it appears that way.
And that's the biggest pick you have to make. Like, I was just like right now, like Beane is kind of like Mr. April, like in baseball terms in Buffalo. Like, he came up with the bases loaded in Game 7 of the World Series, and he knocked it out of the park because he got Josh Allen right, and he's also got Tremaine Edmonds right, and he also, hit a clutch double in picking up Gabe Davis, it looks like, and Tyler Bass and Danger. Like he's struck out a couple times. Like, let's not act like everything has been a home run, but he's been a really good and really clutch in those big moments, in those big positions. To Mike's point, where you say that he's comfortable, and Jenna to say that he's got that confidence of knowing, like, yeah, I've done it before. Now he doesn't want to strike out this year and come up empty. Yeah. But I think the jury's still out on what AJ Epinesa can bring. I think you're still trying to figure out some more of those pieces.
I think one other quick thing, Jen, I wanted to add. The other thing about Brandon Beane is he's not Danny Ainge. Okay, Danny Ainge's problem in the NBA is he wants to win every deal and bludgeon the other team, and I think that has hurt him in making smart deals. If you're a Celtics fan, it's a big frustration. Brandon Beane gives something up to get something. I mean, he gave up a 1 last year to the Vikings, and the Vikings are thrilled with the player Jefferson that they got. You have to be willing to do that. It's great to win a deal, and every once in a while you really win one. But I think another team would know Brandon Beane is going to offer something fair and be ready to make that deal. He's not looking where he's like, yeah, let me move up to your pick, for my pick at 30, he wants 2 2s and a 3. Like, that's not what he's doing. He's going to offer fair value because he's confident in what he's doing and why he's doing it. So, and that's why the phone rings.
Let's say that's good business. Nobody wants to be looking like a fool. And I think when both teams get something. All right, so let's put on our Brandon Beane caps.
Yep.
Who do you think, as of right now, where are you leaning? Dan, I'll start with you.
I'm going to stick with it. And I know this is the cop out. And Mike, right before we did this podcast, we said we can change these picks. I think the Bills trade back later into the into early second round. I think they trade out of 30. They trade back. I think they take a corner. I think if they could have the one that they want, I think it's Greg Newsome. And I think that's what they would like to do, is to go corner, because that's where a starter would be needed.
Bless you. Okay, Mike.
I'm with Dan on corner. I think it is as close to a position of need that they have. They need a pass rusher too. But I like corner. I just like so much about Caleb Farley. Now, I'm saying that while at the same time, there's issues about, injury and coming off of that, and how much do they know? But I think if they're comfortable, whether it's at 30 or, to Dan's point, this is a guy that before, even with the back thing, people had him as a top 12, top 13 pick with his talent. And he just fits the way they like to play. And it makes sense to be going early for a corner. One of those positions he mentioned, that 5th-year option, you like in a position like a left tackle or a corner or a quarterback. So I'm going to say they stay where they are and they take Farley out of Virginia Tech.
Okay. I could see that as well. I really do think that we know there's been a propensity to take defensive players, AJ Epinesa, obviously he was a 2nd-round pick, but Ed Oliver, Trey White with those first rounds. But I think I'm going to do a quick zag while you guys do the zig. I think today, you heard so much talk about Travis Etienne and what he brings. And I really thought easy, Dan. I thought that while it made sense, I didn't think that Beane would be interested in that. And then hearing how he talked about and saying, I don't think Devin Singletary or Zach Moss are home run hitters, and to bring in a guy that has a different type of skill set, that kind of changed my mind. And thinking, okay, the fact that, and Brandon Beane doesn't say that, because that's not exactly a compliment to those guys. And I feel like he would not say that unless that's truly how he felt. And so when he dropped that little bit, I thought, okay. I could see them maybe going in that type of direction. But I mean, there's the thing about this draft is the Bills are going to take the best player available, and maybe that will be, in later rounds, but something to watch for sure.
One other quick thing. Someone had mentioned it, and I had seen it sort of trending on Twitter the one day, deals that could be made on draft day and moving one way or the other. And I think it makes a lot of sense. The Eagles trying to jump back into the first round. I mean, they're in need of talent.
Mm-hmm.
They have extra first rounders next year. They may try to make a move. They picked up an extra third this year. The Eagles trying to move to that 30th spot. The Bills moving back, which would be still be early in the second round, and Zach Ertz being part of that deal. Because I think.
Are you Zach Ertz agent?
Zach Ertz would really help this offense. I'm telling you. And you get him in a deal like that, he's in the last year of a contract. It's one of those kind of trades. And Jenna mentioned it. When Brandon Beane says something, he's usually not blowing smoke. He said it at the end of the year. They need to upgrade the tight end position.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've really done that yet.
I'm kind of over the Zach Ertz conversation. I've been over it for a little bit now. And
that's about JJ Watt.
He moved on to bringing in a running back.
Well, I'll finish here. We've talked about how you want that tight end to be that safety blanket for a quarterback. It's the reason that the Chiefs took Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He was another guy that Mahomes could dump the ball off to, good catch and, kind of like that. The running back, especially Najee Harris, he caught the ball really well out of the backfield in Alabama. I'm just saying, if you can't find that tight end, Mike, that you wanted to upgrade to be that safety blanket, you could, and like I said, because there's only one tight end that is graded to first round. Yeah. And that's Kyle Pitts, and the Bills would have to give up next year's first round pick to get him. I just don't see it happening.
That doesn't even come close. This year's first and next year's first. Oh, they would be giving up that and more because they got to move up into. He could go third or fourth. I mean, fourth, maybe. They're not getting Kyle Pitts.
And there's two other tight ends, and I don't know their names off the top of my head, but one of them's from Notre Dame and the other one's from Boston College. Those are the next two guys, but those are in that second to fourth round. Again, do you want to try and find another Dawson Knox? I don't know. It'll just be an interesting dynamic. Mike I think you have a Zach Ertz Bills t-shirt jersey, all set and ready to go that you just can't wait.
That guy is a McDermott type player. He is a winner. He's made big plays in big moments. He has a Super Bowl winning catch, and he would love playing with Josh Allen. And I just think for 2 years, he would be fantastic in this offense.
That's fair. That's fair.
And especially if it's that kind of deal. It allows Howie Roseman to save some sort of face by dealing him, but it's more of that type of move involving maybe a pick and moving up in the draft. So my 2 cents. And Dan loves running backs.
Absolutely. All right. We
need football.
We do have something special coming up next week. Mike, why don't you tell them about?
Yeah. So we'll have our show, Let's Talk Football Live. But what we're going to do is it's on Thursday, the day of the draft. On TV on 13 Wham ABC in Rochester. It'll be on 7:30 to 8, but we'll be on from 7 to 7:30 with you here. So we'll be on YouTube. We'll be on Facebook, this Facebook page, getting your thoughts leading up to it, the anticipation, the last minute things. We'll be in Cleveland to get the vibe of what it is. Not quite like it's been in past years or next year, Dan, when we're heading to Vegas.
Yeah, I get Cleveland. Dan gets Vegas.
Because Dan and I were set to go to Vegas last year, and it got kiboshed. So Vegas is next year. And hopefully, that's when it's back to being the real draft. But in this case, just sort of the vibe of what it is, because this is a big fan event, even maybe more so than the Super Bowl was, because there's more people that get access to it. So stay with us. We'll have content, obviously, leading up to it. And then the show's on Thursday night.
Yeah, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy our content. For Mike Catalana and Dan Fates, I'm Jenna Cottrell. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you later on this week here on Buffalo Plus.